the head of public security to appear before the Public Safety Committee to address the comments of the Prime Minister and his conspiracy theory.
Good.
The honourable member is at the end of his 5 minutes, and he does have 5 minutes coming to him afterwards. Again, often relevance is a question, and seeing how it gets brought back, I'll leave that with the member. I'm sure it'll be very interesting once he returns after question period. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is World Water Day, and as the National Geographic advises us, we're in a water crisis where the crisis is too much water in some places, not enough in others. Studies by scientists have shown that between 1995 and 2015, 90% of all weather-related events, such as extreme weather events, floods, storms, heat waves, and droughts, are water-related events. And of the world's large megacities, 14 out of 20 are now experiencing water scarcity. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that the water crisis runs in tandem with the climate crisis. And as we operate in a state of cognitive dissonance, we all know the climate crisis is real. There are measures being taken by this government, but they're not close to enough to avoid the climate crisis. So we need to wake up. We need to act. And we need to stand together and say, we stand with water protectors and say, water is sacred. Thank you.
Honourable member for Halifax.
Mr. Speaker, it's the sloppiest, sauciest, greasiest time of the year in Halifax. It's Burger Week again, presented by the Coast newspaper with a portion of profits going to Feed Nova Scotia. Now in its 6th year with a record-breaking 125 burgers to choose from, there's a burger for everybody. We've got burgers for vegans at Dee Dee's with a lentil and roasted mushroom patty. There are burgers for breakfast at Roby Street Station. A sausage patty with egg between 2 hash browns coming right up. Donut lovers, rejoice. Enjoy your beef in a coffee-glazed bacon donut fritter bun at Vandal Donuts. Got the munchies? The Auction House burger comes topped with mac and cheese. And what would a Halifax Burger Week be without a Donair burger, sandwiched between garlic fingers, brought to you by the king of Donair? And try to save room for a trio of tiny macaroon burgers at the Old Apothecary. So, Mr. Speaker, I call on my fellow Haligonians, grab your burger passports and your wet wipes and hit the town using the hashtag HFX Burger Week. Hey, all right.
I better get a burger passport. Honourable member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this Tuesday we saw, with great fanfare, the Minister of Public Safety announce changes to our new firearms law. But we expected some changes that would actually keep guns out of the hands of gang members, but we saw little of that. But what we did see, however, unfortunately, adding additional red tape to lawful firearms ownership and then buying non-restricted firearms in Canada. Sadly, though, the worst of the worst happened. What we predicted, by my colleagues behind me, what we predicted was a return of the long gun registry to Canada, not just through the back door, as in the new reference system, where every non-restricted firearm is going to need a reference number and be tracked by the registrar, Mr. Speaker, but also deliberately handing, through the front door, a copy of the old firearms registry data to the province of Quebec. This is indeed shameful, and a breach of their promise to their constituents in rural Canada that said they wouldn't re-establish a long gun registry. It is unfortunate that this PM is so uninformed about Canadian firearms law.
The honourable member for Saint-Léonard-Saint-Michel.
Historic moment. Parliament sits during the first National Impaired Driving Prevention Week. Impaired driving is the criminal act that kills the most Canadians. As we are on the eve of cannabis legalization, we should all have a heightened sense of urgency in addressing this terrible scourge that kills and severely injures indiscriminately thousands of Canadians. Je partage avec vous tous ma vision.
I share with all of you my vision for objective zero deaths. We need to support scientific research that will move forward progress and developments that can have a positive impact on driver behavior and provide them with the technological tools required to improve road safety. Today, I invite all of my colleagues to write to the principals of the schools in their riding to recall that every life can be saved.
Member for Fort Moody Coquitlam.
On World Water Day, I rise to speak about the importance of protecting Canada's lakes and rivers.
In 2012, the Conservative government gutted the Navigable Waters Protection Act. During the 2015 federal election, the Liberals promised they would immediately reverse strict environmental protections and create new environmental safeguards. Almost 3 years later, the Liberals finally introduced Bill C-69, the Navigation Protection Act, which falls considerably short of what the Liberals promised during the election campaign. In fact, the minor changes introduced to the bill make little or no difference for the protection of 99% of our waterways. Instead, Canadians will be forced to fight the government on a case-by-case basis to protect each lake, river, creek, or stream. On World Water Day, I hope this government and all MPs will acknowledge the importance of water to Canadians and pledge to conserve, protect, and restore watersheds right across this great country.
The honourable member for Oakville.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the achievements of 2 young women in the Oakville 540 Golden HoC Squadron. Flight Sergeants Maya Musili and Rachel Shee have received Air Cadet League Long Service Medals for their commitment to leadership and service to Oakville. Named after the world-famous Golden Hawks Precision Flight Team of the Royal Canadian Air Force, the 540 Golden HoC Squadron is one of over 450 Royal Canadian Air Cadet Squadrons across Canada. Locally, they've been serving the youth of Oakville since 1951. Hundreds of youth each year participate in their programs and gain valuable skills in leadership, community engagement, and teamwork. It's committed and engaged young leaders like Maya, Rachel, and all the 540 Golden HoC Squadron cadets that make me so proud to represent Oakville. I know that their futures are very bright, and I expect big things from the entire 540 Golden HoC Squadron. Keep up the great work, cadets.
The honourable member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Mr. Speaker, the Swift Current Broncos have a remarkable history, a history of great success and tremendous challenge. A successful Junior A franchise in the smallest Western Hockey League city requires a huge community effort. And this year, that community was there. A record-setting year for attendance, an improvement of 18,000 fans from last year. All of Southwest Saskatchewan is supporting our team. And for good reason. The Broncos are rated number 4 in the country and have recorded the most points in a season since they won the Memorial Cup in 1989. They finished second in the WHL and are moving into the first round of the playoffs against the Regina Pats, a team that wants to win because they are this year's hosts of the Memorial Cup. Mr. Speaker, the hard-hitting, fast-getting Broncos are on their way, led by Captain Glenn Godden and goalie Stuart Skinner. Mr. Speaker, Swift Current area will be decked out in blue and green as the Swift Current Broncos begin the road to another Memorial Cup. Go Broncos, go!
Member for Kitchener Centre.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, on March 14th, the world lost a brilliant mind. Stephen Hawking tried to better understand the fundamental laws that govern the universe.
Of our reality, and along the way, he helped to make theoretical physics and cosmology accessible to millions, acted as a champion for those with disabilities, and became a beloved pop cultural icon. In my own community of Kitchener-Waterloo, Mr. Hawking will be best remembered for his work at the Perimeter Institute, where he was a distinguished visiting research chair. Autour du monde, nous nous souviendrons.
Around the world, we will remember him for his scientific rigor and intellectual honesty, for his humor, and for his work on the theory of black holes.
On behalf of Kitchener-Waterloo and this House, I would like to take this opportunity to offer my condolences to the Hawking family and to all of those with whom Mr. Hawking explored the farthest reaches of our universe. Merci beaucoup.
Honourable member for Pickering-Uxbridge.
Mr. Speaker, last summer the member for Malpeque and I visited the Lucy Maud Montgomery Society in Uxbridge. Anne of Green Gables, her iconic and cherished Canadian story, is based in Prince Edward Island, and earlier this month I was able to tour the set of the new CBC show Anne. I'm proud that this hit television show is partially filmed in my riding of Pickering-Uxbridge, and it was a pleasure to be able to tour the set and meet the talented actors, writers, and production staff who make the show so enjoyable to watch for so many Canadians. At the Canadian Screen Awards, Anne was nominated for 13 awards, which included taking home the award for Best Drama Series. Visiting the set and seeing Anne win the Screen Award serves as an important reminder of the tremendous Canadian arts and culture scene. We should all be proud of the Canadian film and television industry. I want to thank the Canadian Media Producers Association and the cast and crew for their hospitality and congratulate them on all their success.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Haldeman Norfolk.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Friday the 13th in Southern Ontario means one thing: firing up the bike and partying with 100,000 or so of your closest personal friends in Port Dover.
Right on.
Since 1981, bikers from all over Canada and the U.S. descend on this delightful little town of 6,000 people for a motorcycle rally like no other. This year, the first rally will be on Friday, April the 13th, and the second, Friday, July the 13th. Now, what started out as a small get-together over 35 years ago grew by word of mouth. Now, the Dover rallies are among the biggest social events of the year in Haldeman, Norfolk. So this April and July, on the 13th, put on your leathers and ride down to Dover. You'll have a great time. There'll be great people watching. It'll be great to see all sorts of amazing bikes, old and new, and great for receiving the best hospitality that small town Ontario has to offer. Right so on. Saddle up, gas up, and keep the rubber side down.
Right on.
The honourable member for Mission, Matsurie, Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, over the last 3 weeks, I hosted 7 seniors town halls throughout my riding.
Wow.
In Mission, Abbotsford, Agassiz, Lillooet, Lytton, Ashcroft, and Cache Creek, to get feedback from constituents on shaping our national senior strategy. Connecting with constituents is always gratifying, and these meetings were well attended with spirited discussion and great ideas. Through these consultations, I was able to identify several key of improvement, including national pharmacare areas, access to assisted living facilities, financial security for our seniors. I would like to thank the member for Nickel Belt for this hard work with the National Senior Strategy and joining me in my riding. I'm committed to continuing the conversation and ensuring that voices of all seniors heard across our country. Thank you.
The honourable member for Long Range Mountains.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's forest sector provides good jobs for families and communities all across this country. Constituents in my riding of the Long Range Mountains are extremely concerned by the unjustified anti-dumping duties announced by the U.S. against Canadian forest workers. This government is defending the interest of softwood lumber workers by providing nearly $1 billion to support workers and communities and companies. But today, I am calling on our government to do more to stand up for pulp and paper workers by extending supports to help this industry. In my hometown, Cornerbrook Pulp and Paper supports middle-class jobs, provides opportunity for residents across Newfoundland, and provides a market for our wood harvesters all throughout our riding. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Calgary Shepherd.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to express my support for the patients with rare disorders and their family members who came to Ottawa this week to meet parliamentarians and attend the Rare Disease Day conference held by CORD, Canada's national network for organizations representing all those with rare disorders. Their message was clear. We need to improve access to treatment for the 2.8 million Canadians affected by a rare disorder. The Canadian approval process for rare disease treatments or orphan drugs has been called a Kafkaesque nightmare. Less than 60% of orphan drugs make it into Canada, and only 1 in 3 Canadians with a rare disorder can access the treatment they actually need. The federal government is failing to recognize that orphan drugs and rare diseases are complex issues which cannot simply be rolled under one umbrella regulatory review. So I call on the Minister of Health to introduce the orphan drug framework that was completed by the previous Conservative Health Minister, Rona Ambrose. Canadians with rare disorders need this vital framework to address the current challenges and ultimately to help improve and save their lives.
Honourable member for Vancouver Quadra.
Mr. Speaker, since first being elected in Vancouver Quadro, one of the primary concerns I hear from constituents is the shortage of quality, affordable childcare spaces. For example, wait times at the UBC childcare services can reach 2 long years. With Budget 2018, our government is making significant investments to address this shortage. We've committed $7.5 billion over 11 years to help fund early learning and childcare in the provinces and territories. And this much-needed investment will lower the cost for parents and create an estimated 40,000 new childcare spaces. Recently, I was honored to host UBC professor and Order of Canada recipient Janet Worker at my MP Breakfast Connections to discuss her brain research on early child learning. She spoke of how a rich early learning experience sets the stage for success in life. This federal funding will increase parental options, help the economy, improve the lives of many families in all our communities.
Honourable member for Essex.
Cape Town, South Africa is about to completely run out of water within the next several weeks. With 20% of the world's freshwater resources, we may not think Canada would ever find ourselves in a similar situation. But this essential resource is under serious threat from both the effects of climate change and our irresponsible management of it. In my region of southwestern Ontario, black shale, which can contain dangerous heavy metals like arsenic, has been tainting our well water. In Essex, extreme rainfall has been causing flooding across the community, and the growth of dangerous algal blooms on Lake Erie shut down Colchester Beach this past September. Throughout Canada, pollution and toxic chemicals leach into our waterways. Extreme weather overstresses our aging infrastructure, and drinking water quality varies from province to province and is most appalling in Indigenous communities. Climate change will only make these current problems worse. We can no longer rely on our abundance of water resources as an excuse for our lack of action. Canada must become better stewards of this precious public resource. Today, on World Water Day, we must recognize that Canadians deserve better.
The honourable member for Edmonton Manning.
Mr. Speaker, 1 in 10 people in Canada has kidney disease, but often patients show no symptoms until it is quite advanced. That's why early detection and prevention is so important. In the month of March, we recognize Kidney Health Month as an opportunity to talk about the 4 million Canadians living with chronic kidney disease and to recognize the estimated 3,000 Canadians who die every year from this illness. Although there's currently no cure for kidney disease, their best chance for improvement is through transplant, which is why Canada needs a national organ donor registry. Mr. Speaker, I encourage all members of this House and all Canadians to recognize Kidney Health Month by speaking with their families and registering to become an organ donor. Together, we can all give the gift of life. Thank you.
The honourable member for Lac Saint Louis. Mr. Speaker, we all recognize the vital importance of water. We know that the most significant consequences of climate change will affect the world's water supply. We also know that women and girls suffer disproportionately when water and sanitary facilities are lacking because the situation affects their health and often causes them to miss school or work.
Our nation, and we can help the world achieve water security. We have the scientists, the entrepreneurs, the engineers, and the experience in the shared governance of international waters like the Great Lakes to be a global water leader. World Water Day is an opportunity to reflect on the need to continue working on developing a multifaceted vision for water that includes contributing to water security in the world, including through Canada's feminist foreign policy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions orales, oral questions. The honourable member for Durham.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to public safety issues, someone once said this in this House, quote, "Being able to ask questions is essential in a democracy, even in difficult situations, especially in difficult situations," end quote. Who said that, Mr. Speaker? The Prime Minister when he was in opposition. If asking questions is essential to democracy, why is the Prime Minister obstructing the democratic process by refusing to let Daniel Jean appear before the Public Safety Committee?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the central issue raised in the motion that's before the House today has to do with the invitation that was extended to a certain individual. The MP for Surrey Centre has taken responsibility for putting that name forward, and when that mistake was discovered, the invitation was immediately rescinded. Those are the facts, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Durham.
Well, Mr. Speaker, while I like the honourable member's tie, I don't like his response. Jaspal Atwal, the convicted terrorist at the centre of the India scandal, dismisses the Prime Minister's claims of an India conspiracy. The Liberal MP from Surrey Centre refutes the Prime Minister's claims by admitting responsibility. The Foreign Minister refutes the Prime Minister's claims by saying it was an honest mistake. Only two people cling to the conspiracy theory, the Prime Minister and Daniel Jean. Which one will appear before the Public Safety Committee?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the implications of the honourable gentleman's question in relation to Daniel Jean are truly unfortunate. He is, in fact, a public servant of 35 years duration. He has held every senior diplomatic and national security post in the Government of Canada. He has served this country with distinction his entire lifetime. And his only motivation in the public service, Mr. Speaker, is defending the national interest of Canada.
Honourable member for Durham.
Mr. Speaker, enough with the denials from this government and that minister. He needs to be accountable. There's no elevator in this chamber to save him. Members of Parliament deserve the same access to the National Security Advisor that the Prime Minister granted to the media. If the Prime Minister can send Daniel Jean to brief the media, why does he refuse to be transparent and not allow him to brief the democratically elected members of this House?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, when you read the motion that is before the House today, it focuses upon the invitation that was issued with respect to Mr. Atwal. In fact, the facts with respect to that invitation are abundantly clear. The name was put forward by the member for Surrey Centre. That was a mistake. When that mistake was discovered, the invitation was rescinded. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, that is entirely consistent in every respect with the remarks of the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, there are two versions. That's the crux of the story. There's the Indian government's version, the MP's version, the Prime Minister's version, and the Prime Minister is supporting the version that he has given to the national security version. What Canadians want to know is which is the right version. Mr. Jean should come and tell us for himself.
Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman, I think, is misreading his own motion. The motion zeroes in on the question of the invitation. The member for Surrey Centre has accepted responsibility for putting forward the name. The name was a mistake. When the mistake was discovered, the invitation was rescinded. And in the motion, there's a reference to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. That explanation is completely consistent with the position taken by the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. The Minister is a man of experience. He likes playing with words, but the facts are the facts. And the question today is, well, it's in the motion. The Honourable Member has to address his remarks through the Speaker. The fundamental problem, Mr. Speaker, is the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister does not want to let his National Security Advisor come before the committee and give the same version that he gave to the journalists. So the journalists, what, get one version and MPs have to get another one? Why is that?
The Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the National Security Advisor is a public servant of long service to this country. He is a person who has served Canada always with honour and distinction. I certainly hope, in the remarks being directed by the members of the opposition, that they're not impugning the integrity of Mr. Jean.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-Les Basques. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I asked the Minister of Revenue to tell me why tax evasion and abusive tax avoidance only got $15 million out of the $1,000 million that had been promised. And all she could do was reshuffle the same old empty answers. Today we're learning that not only the promised money isn't there, but that also the number of CRA investigations into tax evasion went from 167 cases over the past 6 years to 75. How can she continue to affirm that tax evasion and avoidance is a priority when they refuse to invest the money and the number of investigations are going down? The Minister of Revenue. Well, my colleague's rhetoric does not reflect reality. In the last 3 budgets, it was always clear that our investment would be over 5 years so that we could have a strategic approach for tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance. So we're not just trying to spend money. We are investing intelligently, and we're targeting those investments. We have put more than $100 million in the 2016-2017 budget because it's very important to fight against these tax schemes. The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-Les-Basques. Well, there's still another $985,000 that has to be...
Secrecy and shows no accountability, like the Minister. For example, the General Anti-Avoidance Rule Committee decides what constitutes aggressive tax avoidance. It dictates what is right and what is wrong. We don't know who works on that committee, we don't know what they work on, and we don't know if they're accountable to anyone. But we know that this committee will shape Canadian tax policy for years to come. How can this agency, the Canada Revenue Agency, expect to be trusted when everything they do is done behind closed doors?
The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Mr. Speaker, I'd invite my colleague to do his homework. The Anti-Avoidance Committee is an ad hoc committee that is made up of experts for complex cases. And only the NDP wants to spend just for the sake of spending. There's nothing wrong in having a committee of experts that works without additional spending. Now, our focus is clear. We're giving the agency the resources it needs to target aggressive tax evasion and avoidance. That's a ridiculous answer. Quebecers and Canadians were very clear with this government. They expect the Liberals to apply the same tax rules to web giants as they do to other businesses. Recently, the Liberals looked like they were starting to understand when they said they were going to raise the problem at the G7. The only problem with that is that our partners are already making web giants pay their fair share. Whoops. Besides the United States, only Canada doesn't seem to have the courage. How will the Minister of Finance explain this lack of courage to his G7 counterparts? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue.
important d'avoir une économie qui fonctionne. C'est très important d'avoir un système des impôts qui fonctionne. C'est aussi important de faire des études pour assurer...
Order. Apparently there is a problem with interpretation. The members do not hear. Is it working? Order, please. Order, please. Can you hear the interpretation now? Yes, you can. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, it's very important to make sure that our system works. That is our approach. We know there are changes in our economy, changes within the digital era, and that's why we are conducting studies to ensure that our system continues to work well. That's our approach.
Westminster Burnaby.
So our partners, the countries of the G7, are moving to force the web giants to pay their fair share of taxes. But this Liberal government stands resolutely against a fair tax system. Finance Minister just said they'll study the question. Canadians know what that means. For example, Liberals have been studying pharmacare for 20 years. It means they will do nothing. Why won't this government act in Canadians' best interest and force the web giants to pay their fair share of taxes?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as we consider the way our economy is changing with large international firms that have new business models, we're going to carefully figure out how we can assure that our tax revenues stay appropriately the way they are today, that those enterprises have to pay the appropriate level of tax. As we know, other G7 countries are working together with us and with the G20 to consider how we can do this together, because our international firms working together on an international basis is most appropriate. We've agreed at the G7 and G20 to work towards a 2020 deadline. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals assure us the 2016 pilot data project
and contract with Mr. Wiley was one time. Quick $100,000 out the door, contract ended, let's move on. But, Mr. Speaker, we now know 2 senior Liberal data specialists were on stage with Mr. Wiley at a conference later that year. Wow. One of them, the Liberal Research Bureau's director, the other, Brett Thalman, now the Director of Special Projects in the Prime Minister's office. Now, Mr. Speaker, can the Minister explain this continuing relationship with Mr. Wiley at the highest levels of the PMO?
President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, the LRB has been very clear and transparent, issuing the work statement yesterday, making it very clear that no information of Canadians was in any way compromised. Mr. Speaker, participating in conferences is not a new thing for political staffers. In fact, at the Manning Networking Conference, the Conservative Conference, just a few weeks ago, there was a closed-book session on Facebook training. Now, we don't know, Mr. Speaker, what was discussed at that session because it was closed to the media. They didn't want Canadians to know what they were talking about behind closed doors.
The Honourable Order. Order. The Honourable. Well, at least the House is in a good mood for now. The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Well, that's simply not adequate, Mr. Speaker. One is measured by those with whom one associates. Now, Mr. Speaker, can the Minister explain to the House whether the mining of Canadians' social media data and the use of the results of such analysis to tilt future Canadian election outcomes falls under Mr. Thalman's responsibilities as the Director of Special Projects for the Prime Minister?
Well, President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the honourable member brought up data mining because, in fact, Hamish Marshall, the Conservative campaign director, is also president of his own data mining company, Torch. He also led a panel at the same Manning conference. Now, in fact, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Hamish has also gone further. He says on his website that he is fearless in crafting an approach that pushes the boundaries, breaks the rules, and harnesses the power of all digital channels. Which rules does he intend to break in the next election for the Conservatives?
Order. The Honourable Member for Richmond Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, who is Christopher Wiley? Well, he's a guy with questionable practices for data collection on Facebook. He's a guy who worked with 2 Liberal leaders. He's a guy who collaborated on Donald Trump's presidential campaign. The same guy that the Liberals hired with taxpayer money to collect confidential and personal information from voters. This isn't just a trivial use of taxpayer money. So my question is this, Mr. Speaker. Are they returning the favor for the work that was done on the PM's election campaign?
Sure. Hamish Marshall, the Conservative campaign director for the next election, was also President and Chief Operating Officer of Go Nuclear in 2011 when it bragged of, quote, providing everything from the standard tools like websites and email blasts and web videos to social media management and infiltration. Now, how much infiltration did Mr. Marshall do on behalf of the leader of the official opposition to help him win the leadership? Perhaps the member from Beauce and the member from Durham should be asking that question.
Order.
Order.
The Honourable Member. Order. The Honourable Member for Richmond Athabasca. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's interesting to see how lightly the Liberals take what's being reported in the media and throughout the world. Here's an excerpt from the work statement for Christopher Wiley in 2016. Establish partnerships with Liberal caucus members and recruit voters. Monitor the performance of Liberal MPs in communications with their constituents. establish monitoring practices. And now we're learning that in August 2016, he worked with 2 senior analysts within the PMO. Can the Prime Minister explain to Canadians what the privileged relationship was that Christopher Wylie had with the highest levels of his party? The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, I can tell the honourable member that we used a very secret strategy to win the 2015 election, and I want to share this with them. We actually put Canadians first. We focused on growing the middle class, and in fact, in the last 2 years, that's exactly what we've done, creating 600,000 jobs, lowest unemployment rate in 40 years. In fact, I'll give them a little hint. We might use the same strategy in 2019 too.
Member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday we learned the individual at the heart of the Facebook data leak, Christopher Wylie, is a long-time Liberal staffer. Right. We know the Prime Minister hired him to collect information on Canadians. The Liberals claimed they never used what Mr. Wylie was offering, but they paid him $100,000 anyway. Why?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives used data strategy when they engaged in a $100,000 contract with Agility PR Solutions. They haven't actually provided the public with a statement of work. The LRB has actually done that. Mr. Speaker, this individual had a brief contract to do a pilot for LRB. That contract was not renewed. Hamish Marshall is the campaign director for the Conservative Party for the next election. Perhaps they should be explaining their association with somebody who actively data mines all the time.
Honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, we know the Liberals hired Christopher Wylie in 2016, but they claim he didn't do any work for the government. We also know he received $100,000 of taxpayers' money for services rendered. So the question is, if he really didn't do any work, why was he paid? Was it payback for his help in the 2015 campaign?
Right. The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, the contract commenced in January of 2016, and later that year, that pilot was completed and the LRB did not renew it. Now, in terms of Facebook ads, Mr. Speaker, in terms of using Facebook, right now, the NDP have 4 ads running on Facebook. The Liberal Party has 25. The Conservatives have 247 ads on Facebook, 240 of which are used to attack Liberal MPs. It's very clear that the party is quite familiar at how to use Facebook, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Order for Essex.
Auto manufacturers remain united in their opposition to the TPP and believe the side letters with Japan do nothing to help Canada gain market access. The Liberals refuse to acknowledge that this trade agreement will harm the auto industry and the good-paying jobs that it supports. Auto's major stakeholders have called the side letters useless, and the minister's claims laughable. Auto workers, auto manufacturers, and Canadians have real and fair concerns about their future. The minister claims he is Canada's chief marketing officer, so why does he continue to ignore the very real fears of Canada's second largest exporter?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of International Trade.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Trade helps strengthen the middle class by attracting job-creating investment in Canada and expanding export opportunities for Canadian businesses to large and fast-growing markets. With CPTPP, Canada will soon have preferential access to 500 million customers in the world's most dynamic and fast-growing market. This will strengthen Canadian businesses, grow the economy, and create more well-paying jobs for middle-class Canadians. Our government negotiated the CPTPP to create and sustain growth, prosperity, and well-paying jobs for all Canadians. We wanted a good deal, and that's what we achieved. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, dairy producers are sick of serving as currency for the Liberals. When the CETA and the TPP are signed, producers will lose more than $300 million per year. And that's not to mention all the concessions that the Liberals will grant when they renegotiate NAFTA and when they negotiate Mercosur. Will the Liberals stop using them as currency? When will they understand that dairy producers are vital in areas like that of Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean?
Agriculture.
I appreciate my honourable colleague's question. I can assure her in this House that our party is the party that fought to implement supply management and will continue to defend supply management. As an example, Mr. Speaker, when we put the program in place, we put a $350 million program to make sure that supply management, the dairy industry remained on the cutting edge. $250 million to make sure the farmers stayed on the cutting edge. $100 million to make sure the processors stayed on the cutting edge. We have and will continue to make sure that the supply management system remains strong in this country.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the government just went on and on and on about Mr. and Mrs. and trying to decide how it was going to call people. But Canadians were dealing with real problems. We learned that Canada Post has lost track of 427 passports last year. That's unacceptable. We also learned that the CRA lost track of 21,000 documents. That's also unacceptable. Mr. Speaker, this is private information, and it's very sensitive information. What will the government do to correct these lapses? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Mr. Speaker, I take privacy and tax privacy very, very importantly. Now, the vast majority of breaches are due to mismailings, and we have more than 41,000 staff. We investigate any infractions, any violations, because confidentiality is important, and we take appropriate steps. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, then, the same old refrain. So now they're saying that it's Canada Post's fault? This is a very serious issue. We're talking about 21,000 documents within the CRA. That's 21,000 Canadians who don't know what the government is doing with their returns. This is an issue of security, of safety. Canadians have to be able to trust the government. So what will the minister do besides blame Canada Post for mismailings? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. If my colleague would listen, he would see that I'm not blaming Canada Post. What I'm saying is that the agency takes this very seriously and takes privacy very seriously, because individuals' trust is very important as the foundation of a tax system. So when breaches are declared, we've realized that that has to do with mismailings. The agency is one of the biggest organizations. It has more than 41,000 employees. We conduct in-depth investigations in all infractions or all breaches of confidentiality, and we will take appropriate steps.
February 2017, the Minister of Environment told this House that all of the carbon tax revenues would go back to provincial governments, and none of it would go to the federal Liberal government. Last week, though, this government quietly released a document which said, and I quote, "These revenues do not include those in respect of the GST charged on products and services that may have embedded carbon pricing costs on them." In other words, they're going to collect GST on the carbon tax that Canadians are forced to pay. Why is this Environment Minister breaking her word and taxing the tax?
The Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I always love getting up to answer the members opposite's questions on putting a price on pollution. I'm glad that he's very interested in learning more, because we want to put a price on what we don't want, pollution, so what we can get what we do want, innovation and reduce GHG, so we can have a sustainable planet for our kids and grandkids. Right. In terms of GST, it applies as a final price on all goods and services. This has always been the case, as he well knows.
Order. The old member for Cypress Hills Grasslands may not like the answers, but I know he can restrain himself from talking throughout the answer. The old member for Carleton.
So she says the GST applies on all goods and services. Is the carbon tax a good or a service, Mr. Speaker? Canadians are paying this tax on their home heating, their gas to get to work, indirectly on their groceries, and now they will be forced to pay a tax on that tax. This is among the most regressive taxes, disproportionately targeting poor and working class people. Why is this government taking from those with the least and putting a tax on a tax?
Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's be clear. The most regressive thing you can do is do nothing on climate change. Climate change is real. It's actually a tax on future generations. We are paying the price right now. $100 billion we are paying on the impacts of climate change, from floods, from forest fires, from droughts, and that's happening across the country. Canadians know it's real, and I really wish the party opposite would actually show that they care about taking serious climate action now.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Now, we know that people's personal data are increasingly at risk following on the heels of the Facebook, Equifax, and other scandals. We're asking the government to ask, but we wonder if the government's able to do anything when we see that it's a real sieve. We learned that the government lost passports at Canada Post, lost personal data, Revenue Canada, and there's confidential information at the CSE. When will the Liberals take tangible action to protect the lives or the privacy of Canadians? The Honourable Minister. As I mentioned earlier, the agency takes the protection of privacy for Canadians very importantly. Seriously, rather. Because the tax system is the cornerstone of our system. Breaches are linked to a mail that was mislabeled. And we have some 40,000 employees at the agency, and the agency takes the issue of confidentiality very seriously. We will be taking the necessary steps to deal with it. Mr. Speaker, it's clear that Quebec is going to put an end to the unfairness facing entrepreneurs. Because the Quebec Premier said this morning everybody has to pay their fair share, their taxes. It's out of respect for our businesses here in Quebec. Last week, the Minister of Heritage seems to have seen the light and announced it 2 years too late that she plans to protect cultural distinctions. But what about the Minister of Finance? Will he commit to protecting the competitive nature of Quebec businesses before the next election? The Honourable Minister. Benefits linked to the digital world are something that is very important. Web giants must acknowledge this. As the Minister of Finance has already said, the international community has accepted to examine the impact of digitization on the current fiscal system and to reach a consensus. Canada will also work with other G7 countries and G20 countries on this very important issue. The Honourable Member for Laval-les-Îles. Mr. Speaker, the tax season is upon us, and tax returns include credits and benefits that help Canadians to make ends meet. However, sometimes it can be difficult for some people to do their tax returns. Can the minister inform this House of what the government is doing to help low-income Canadians to do their tax returns? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague, the member for Laval-les-Îles, for his ongoing support for vulnerable Canadians. Our government has committed to ensuring that all Canadians receive the credits and benefits they're entitled to. That's why Budget 2018 will double funding for the Community Volunteer Program to support even more people. This is an important measure for vulnerable Canadians to fill out their income tax returns. And I want to say thank you to all volunteers who will be participating this year.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I asked the Prime Minister about illegal pipeline protesters who injured RCMP officers in Burnaby. One officer was even kicked in the head. The minister shared sentiments about officers and first responders with which we all agree, but he didn't actually answer my clear question. So I'm asking again, when will the Prime Minister himself condemn the physical violence against RCMP officers by illegal protesters of the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, of course, all Canadians have the democratic right to express their point of view and to express dissent, but that must always be done within the parameters of the law, and violence in those circumstances is simply unacceptable.
The Honourable Member for Medicine Hat. Order. The Honourable Member for Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are rightly concerned that the Prime Minister refuses to condemn the illegal, violent protests against Trans Mountain Pipeline. Workers and families need these jobs, communities need the investment and the benefits that they bring. Mr. Speaker, what Canadians need less of is the rhetoric, and they need more of leadership, and to enforce the rule of law. Stop endangering the police, stop endangering pipeline workers, stop undermining Canada's economy. Will the Prime Minister finally do his job and condemn these illegal acts?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, with the hubbub in the House, I think the honourable gentleman missed my previous answer. The answer is, of course, that Canadians, all Canadians, have the democratic right to express their point of view and to express dissent. But that must be done always, at all times, within the parameters of Canadian law, and violations of the law cannot be tolerated.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Finance has called farmers tax frauds. The Minister of Agriculture abandoned them in the last budget. The Minister of Transport is siding with the rail companies and is requiring farmers to deal with shipping their product on their own. Following the ridiculous memo on the use of Mr. and Mrs., we can see that Service Canada is treating farmers as criminals under a new directive that will give them inquisition-like powers. Why does the Liberal Prime Minister have it in for Canadian farmers like that? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, my colleague covered so many topics we didn't know who should answer the question, but as regards farmers, I can point out that we want the grains in the West to reach their destination as quickly as possible. That's why the Minister of Agriculture and I wrote to CN and to CP and stated that they needed to do better. They put in place a program to do better. We will monitor them closely on a daily basis to ensure that the pace and rate increases and remains so.
Mr. Speaker, I guess this shows you how much of a priority agriculture is when each minister doesn't even know who to get up and answer the question. But farmers and ranchers who use the temporary foreign workers program are stressed and they're angry. Service Canada auditors are treating them like criminals. Liberals are ordering officials to go onto farms, into homes, and search computers, documents, cell phones, with no worry about biosecurity, let alone property rights. No permission necessary. They'll even go in your house if you're not home. This is an unbelievable attack on Canadian agriculture. Why is the Prime Minister allowing farmers' property rights to be violated?
Honourable Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, we're very proud of the work of the inspectors that work for Service Canada and follow all rules and regulations in doing this critical work. Last year, we assured Canadians that when we use labour from other countries, we would protect those folks, and we would make sure that employers were living up to their obligations of taking care of the very people who are working so hard on behalf of Canadians, and that's exactly what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Desnefe, Mississippi, Churchill River.
The missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls inquiry held only one closed-door meeting in northern Saskatchewan, despite their promise to hold 3 meetings in northern Saskatchewan. Many families from Saskatchewan's north didn't have the opportunity to share the stories of those they love. Now the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations has said she received a request to extend the mandate of the inquiry for 2 more years. When will the Minister hold inquiry hearings in La Ronge, La Loche and Meadow Lake?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for her question today. It's unbelievable the amount of work the Commission has been able to do, the amount of families that have been able to have their voices heard. But this inquiry is far from over, and we know that. We are committed to ending the ongoing national tragedy, and we thank the Commission for the work that they have done so far. The Minister has received a request from the Commission, and she is discussing this with families, with Indigenous partners, and today with provincial and territorial counterparts. We know that the Commission's mandate is clear.
Member for Burnaby South.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to new pipeline projects in 2014, the Prime Minister stated, quote, "Governments may issue permits, but only communities can grant permission." Mr. Speaker, my community of Burnaby, First Nations governments in the province of British Columbia all oppose the new Kinder Morgan pipeline and do not grant permission for it to proceed. Will the Prime Minister honour his words and not force this pipeline through communities without consent? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
The honourable member says all people oppose the pipeline. I don't think so. I think that there are many people across Canada who agree with the government that responsibly moving our resources is a good idea to grow the Canadian economy. Expansion of export markets, a better price for our resources, jobs for Canadians, Indigenous partnerships, that's the recipe, not making blanket statements that have no reality to them.
The Honourable Member for Caribou, Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, first we learned the Minister awarded the contract to his Liberal colleague's brother, even though their application was missing critical elements. They weren't even incorporated until a week after the announcement. They didn't have multiple First Nations partners until after the announcement. They didn't even have a boat, and they still don't. And Mr. Speaker, it gets even better. Yesterday we learned his colleague's brother isn't the only well-known Liberal involved in the scandal. The Minister's former colleague and Liberal MP Todd Russell is also getting in on the action. How long has the Minister known Todd Russell is involved?
Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague again makes a series of assertions based on a proposal that he has not seen. He should be very careful before he asserts a series of things that perhaps are entirely false. With respect to Mr. Russell, he is a respected, elected Indigenous leader from Newfoundland and Labrador, and he has decided that his community will benefit from participating in this initiative, something the previous Conservative government forgot to do when they had a similar proposal in 2014.
Honourable Member for Caribou, Prince George.
Hashtag clam scam. Mr. Speaker, the Minister said media reports pertaining to the Arctic surf clam bid were inaccurate. But it's not just the media who are questioning the validity of this process. The Liberal Fisheries Minister of Newfoundland and Labrador, as well as numerous First Nations, are all speaking out. So, Mr. Speaker, who's really spreading misinformation? Is it the media? Is it the Liberal Newfoundland Fisheries Minister? Is it the Innu First Nation? Is it the Quileute First Nation? Is it the Mi'kmaq First Nation? Or is it this Minister?
Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard.
Speaker, I can assure you and all members of the House that it certainly isn't me that would spread misinformation. Mr. Speaker, what I can tell you is our decision to include Indigenous participation in this important offshore fishery was a historic decision. The previous Conservative government had a process in 2014-2015 to add a new entrant to this fishery as well. Their process was very similar to the process that we initiated publicly in September. But they forgot to include Indigenous people. Mr. Speaker, we thought it was important to do so.
The Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Thank you. The Minister committed to give surf clam quota to companies who partnered with multiple First Nations. Yet the Liberal company that actually got the contract didn't have multiple First Nations partners until after it was awarded a contract that was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. In fact, the company didn't even exist until after the contract was awarded. I am no pescatarian, but something is fishy here. Maritime politicians, the Mi'kmaq First Nations, and many others are asking, is this just a kickback for Liberal Party donors?
Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, what's fishy is colleagues standing up in the House of Commons and asserting a series of things that are not accurate. Mr. Speaker, what we said is that we would have a public process to encourage industry and Indigenous groups to submit proposals of how they could access this important fishery, something that the previous Conservative government did in 2014-2015, but they forgot to include Indigenous peoples. We selected a proposal, Mr. Speaker, that included the best economic benefits for Indigenous peoples in 5 provinces, 4 Atlantic provinces and Quebec, and we're very proud of that decision.
Honourable Member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Mr. Speaker, as the Member of Parliament for New Brunswick Southwest, I have the privilege of having many members of the Canadian Armed Forces among my constituents. Many work at CFB Gagetown, where every summer reservists from across the country go through their training, learn their trade and hone their skills. Can the Minister of National Defence inform this House on how our government is fulfilling its commitments to employment initiatives and invest in Canadian youth and in the Canadian Army Reserves? Thank you.
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague from New Brunswick Southwest for her question and her dedicated service to her constituents. As outlined in our defence policy, our government is committed to employing new and recently enrolled members of the Reserves. Last week, I announced our new full-time summer employment program for members of the Reserves. Through this initiative, reservists will receive competitive pay and learn valuable military skills, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to also take this opportunity to thank them for their tremendous service to Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals are misinforming Canadians by saying the deployment of our troops to Mali is a UN peacekeeping mission, when in reality it is not. The head of the UN mission in Mali recently said, and I quote, "Terrorists are waging a real asymmetrical war against us." And I'd like to emphasize the word war. End of quote. Insurgent ambushes, roadside bombs, terrorist attacks on UN bases is the norm in Mali. Will the Prime Minister honestly say what the United Nations is saying and admit he's sending our troops into a war zone in Mali?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, the safety of our brave women and men in uniform is extremely important to us, and we are doing everything we can to ensure they can do their work as safely as possible. But let me be frank. There are risks in Mali, as there are with all UN peacekeeping operations. That is because UN peacekeepers go where they are needed, which is inevitably where there is conflict and instability. Canadians believe in the international rules-based order, and we need to back up that belief with our actions.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. About a year ago, the Liberal government failed to listen to the government and to withdraw rail transportation from the bill that was under consideration. And the railway companies are being held hostage. It's time for the Senate now to fix the problems caused by the government and to deal with Bill C-49.
I commit to supporting our motion today, formally asking the Senate to expedite the passage of these provisions and help the crisis facing grain farmers out west.
Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, we are taking measures to accelerate the flow of grain for our Western farmers to get them to world markets. At the same time, I have been urging the other chamber to move as quickly as possible in the adoption of Bill C-49. This is a bill which, unlike the Harper government, which had 10 years to try to modernize the movement of freight rail, did not do anything except come up with a Band-Aid bill. We are actually putting in place something that will allow us to deal efficiently with the movement of freight rail, including grain, efficiently once that bill is passed.
Honourable Member for Kitchener South Hespeler.
Mr. Speaker, on February 23rd, UNICEF called on the international community to intervene urgently to help the Rohingya people. Colleagues in the House are familiar with the suffering that they have endured and now face yet another threat: the rainy season and cyclones that will soon hit the region. The impact could have terrible effects on what is now the largest refugee camp. Can the Minister of International Development and La Francophonie update this House on what the government plans to do to help the Rohingya people?
The Honourable Minister.
Colleague from Kitchener South Hespeler for strong involvement to human rights issues. Canada was one of the first countries to provide life-saving assistance in response to the Rohingya crisis.
Last Friday, I announced an additional $8.15 million in emergency assistance in anticipation of the monsoon rains, bringing our aid to nearly $46 million. Mr. President, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and myself are working on a more impactful approach in terms of humanitarian assistance and respect of human rights. Thank you.
Honorable député de Lévis.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we believe that we are again seeing very clearly a very specific lack of judgment by the Prime Minister, who's trying to restore his image by sending our troops to Mali. In our view, there is no peace to be kept in Mali. There's a war. Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister and his government confirm that Mali is a war zone? Yes or no? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are doing all we can to protect our soldiers, but we must be frank with the Canadians. There are risks in Mali, as with all UN peacekeeping operations. It's because peacekeeping missions go in where they're necessary, and inevitably, that is where conflicts and instability are. Canadians believe in international rules and need to support that through tangible action. The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, 800 workers have lost their lives lost their jobs at the Davie shipyard because Quebec was taken for a ride. At present, there is the possibility of a tender call for 7 Halifax-class frigates, and it will be released shortly. But curiously, it seems as if the criteria are stacked so that Davie won't be able to bid by requiring the shipyards to be free of ice year-round. Will the government put forth the tender call immediately and ensure that the eligibility criteria will enable Davie to, in fact, qualify? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are involved in negotiations with Davie to address the needs of the Coast Guard when it comes to ice breakers, and we will continue those discussions. We are doing our due diligence, and we will continue to look for solutions with the shipyard. The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Well, on the topic of ice breakers, it's of the essence. We need quick action. We need icebreakers now and in the future. But Seaspan in Vancouver is unable to deliver on time, isn't able to deliver the only icebreaker that the government's ordered yet. Now, it's not complicated. If the St. Lawrence isn't navigable year-long, ships will go elsewhere. And if we're not competitive, it's because the federal government's snubbing Davie shipyards. So, it's a simple question, a yes or no answer. Will the government issue... The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are continuing to be involved in discussions. We are doing our diligence, and we will report back to the House when we have an answer.
Does the honourable member have a point of order? Mr. Speaker, I think you'll find there's unanimous consent for the House to pass the following motion, that by unanimous consent, the Chamber calls on the government to respond to the Government of Quebec's request by committing to reimburse all of the costs related to the wave of asylum seekers arriving in Quebec last year because it's under federal jurisdiction. There's no unanimous consent for that motion. The honourable member for Couch and Malahat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on a point of order because in a moment I'll be seeking unanimous consent for a motion that will address the ongoing grain crisis in the prairies. On Monday, the Standing Committee on Agriculture heard from witness after witness that said the situation is decidedly unsatisfactory. So, Mr. Speaker, that's why I am very hopeful that if you seek it, you will find unanimous consent for the following urgent motion. That, in light of the acute crisis within the grain transport industry, a message be sent to the Senate calling on their honours to divide Bill C-49, an act to amend the Canada Transportation Act and other acts respecting transportation, and to make related and consequential amendments to other acts into 2 bills in order to create a new bill comprised of Clause 2 to Clause 13, Clause 20 to Clause 59,